Getting right into today's video, we're going to start off by prepping my practice hand. I went ahead and applied my easy tape to my natural nails of my practice hand. I'm going to be using the tip that I'm going to be working on to remove that little white piece of backing to our tape. And then we are going to be sliding in that tip, pressing down firmly so that it adheres properly. I'm going to go ahead and repeat that on the rest of the nails. Note that this is an easy prep system that comes with our practice hands. You can find all the products linked in the description box, along with using my discount code VEE for a little bit of % off of your purchase. I am going to be going in with my tips of choice. Someone requested for me to do stiletto nails, so that is exactly what we're doing. We're all about suggestions here, so always feel free to request, suggest, recommend anything. I'll try my best to fulfill that. So we're going to be doing stiletto. I am using the universal tips from Not Polish. I'm just going to be filing the sides, just ensuring that those tips fit nicely to the tip that I placed on my practice hand. If you were to be doing this on a client and they're in between sizes, always go with the bigger one and then file them so that it is nice and flush to the sidewalls of your client's nails. So I'm just going to continue to do that. Then we're going to hop right into our basic acrylic application. If you guys have been struggling with acrylic application, make sure you guys practice your liquid to powder ratio. We will leave the linked video to my liquid to powder ratio video. That is very old, however, very useful. So definitely go check that out. I'm going to start off by taking a medium-sized bead of acrylic, and I am placing it near where the tip meets the free edge of the nail. And then we are going to be bouncing it slightly down, rolling that product to the center, and then we start tapping the product into place. Notice how I'm not over manipulating the product. I am simply tapping it gently, kind of wiping those sides over and over again, making sure that everything is nice and smooth. I am using Sea Salt Caramel from Not Polish, and their products lay so well, so definitely check them out if you guys are interested. We're taking another medium-sized bead, this time placing it slightly above the first one. I'm going to focus on retaining the thickness near the top portion of my bead, which is where my apex would be going. And then once I'm content with that and I feel like I have it nice and round, we're going to rehydrate our brush just a little bit so that it allows us to work with the product a little bit better. And then we're just going to start blending. I continue to tap in those sides, ensuring that the product isn't overflowing on the sides, and then always focusing on the smoothness of it. So as you guys can see, we're starting to build up that apex area. I always recommend to turn the finger sideways so that just in case you need to add a little bit more thickness anywhere, you can see it from that view, which is what I showed there. And now I am taking a small bead, placing it where I need to infill the area, blending the top half up and then blending the bottom half down. And I continue to wipe until everything is nice and smooth. I'm going to be taking a small bead now near the cuticle area. We're going to hold the finger in a downward position. I gently bounce the product down and immediately start working from about a quarter of the top portion of the bead. I start pushing it upwards and to the sides to ensure that I get a nice good shape. Now I did take a little too long that my acrylic started drying, so that is completely fine. I could always either file that or I can add in some more acrylic, which I ended up opting for adding a little bit more acrylic. As long as my cuticle area is flush, I really don't care what the bottom of the bead looks like because I can always fix it. So the way that we're doing that here is taking a nice wet bead. I'm placing it right in the middle section where it needed to blend a little bit more. And again, half top we blend up, half bottom of the bead we blend down. And then I'm adding a little bit more because it was a little naked right there. I simply add a small bead and then we blend either way up or down. Now for the ring finger, we're going to be doing white acrylic. This one is Milky White from Not Polish. It's a little bit more of like a softer white, not super crisp. We're going to do the same process, medium-sized bead where the free edge meets the nail, and then we start to bounce the acrylic downwards, and then we start to work it gently, slowly, with lots of love. Now do note that this is a size 10 acrylic brush, so your bead sizes may differ depending on whether you're using a bigger brush or a smaller brush. Either they're gonna look bigger than mine or smaller than mine, so do note that I'm using a size 10. So I'm gonna go ahead and place the second bead on top of, overlaying it on top of the first one just a smidge, and then we start to work those sides and start to blend it downwards. We're gonna continue that on the rest of the nails, and then we will be back to the filing process. So definitely make sure you guys follow along the process, watch carefully, and practice. If you guys are feeling a little bit discouraged, I promise you it will only get better the more you practice and the more effort you put into your practice. Now once everything is nice and dry, I'm going to go in with my e-file first. This one is the one from Not Polished. I have it at a speed of about 12,000 RPMs and I'm using a 5-in-1 bit to do this process. I'm simply going to be taking that e-file and filing around the cuticle area. I want to make sure that it is nice and crisp, and that is the area that I'm going to be focusing on with my e-file because I get a better flush look with my e-file. And then the rest of the nail we're going to be filing with our hand file, but you can always use your e-file through the rest of the process if you prefer to do so. But if you're a beginner, definitely 10 out of 10 recommend just stick with the hand file. Sometimes it could be a little bit easier. Now for filing with the hand file, I'm using my Tommy Taylor peel and stick file. We're going to be filing those sides and then very quickly filing the surface of the nail, making sure that everything is nice and smooth. You can do this with about a medium amount of pressure. Nothing too crazy. I'm just making sure that everything is nice and smooth. And I'm going to again continue to focus on those sides and then very carefully on the surface of the nail. I'm gonna go ahead and clean the surface of my nails, but also my practice hand. If you guys know, this is a silicone practice hand, so dust will get stuck to it. However, it is very easy to clean. All I do is remove the excess dust just with a dust brush, and then we thoroughly clean it with a lint-free wipe and a little bit of alcohol. Y'all see how easy that was? And then at this point, I forgot that I didn't buff the nail, so I wanted to make sure that I did that. I'm going in with buffer and just buffing the surface of the nail ever so lightly. Nothing crazy either on this part, just trying to get it nice and smooth. You guys can always skip this part and go in with a top coat if you prefer to do so. That'll make the surface super freaking smooth. That way when you go in with your nail art and all the details will go on there and glide on there super easy. Now for today's nail art, if you guys missed it from the thumbnail, I don't know how y'all couldn't. They are gory, bloody, and nasty, if you will. We're going to be starting off with the base portion of our design. I specialize in colored acrylic and acrylic nail art. I want to say that I have mastered that down to the T. If you guys don't agree, let me know in the comment section, but I am not cocky about a lot of things, but that is one thing that if you show me a design, more than likely I'll be able to do it with acrylic. I don't know what it is. It was just something that I learned very early on. And so if I'm given the option to do 3D, I'll probably do it with acrylic and not molding gel. So I don't know, it's just my favorite, and I think it's so freaking cool being able to build stuff. So we're starting off with this wound on the pinky nail. I went ahead and added kind of 2 layers on the sides that are meeting into a point. And what I did was waited till it started mattifying, and then we start poking at it to add it some texture. You can use a dotting tool, you can use a cuticle pusher. I think I just used my brush. And then I added little streaks of that down the center to give it kind of like flesh vibes. And now I'm going to be using these little metal rings that typically we use for the piercings of nail art. I broke it, spread it open, and I am now placing it as our little staples for the wound. So I'm adding a tiny bead of acrylic right where they're going to be touching the nail. I ended up wiping it one time because I put it on there too close and I needed them further apart. So I measured it, figured out where they needed to go, added the little beads of acrylic. As they start drying, you can put your little staple in there. And then we are going to pretty much encapsulate all those edges in there so that it is nice and flush and it's not crazy looking. I'm adding a little bit more to kind of blend the whole vibe together. And then we're going to be moving on to the next nail. Super simple for the first step. Don't overthink it. Just do it. Now moving on to the middle finger, we're also going to be doing 3D acrylic work. This one was a little tedious, not in the like complicated way, but it just took a good amount of time to get it done. I was also like stopping and talking and vibing, so it took me a little bit longer than it should have. I'm going to be doing brain matter or intestines, whichever you prefer that it looks like. I a little bit was going for brain matter, but also it looked a lot more like intestines, so I don't know, whatever y'all prefer, that is exactly what it's going to be. I'm going to be starting off with acrylic. I'm grabbing a good amount for my beads, and then we just start carving it out. I am using a little bit more of a wet product. That way it allows me or gives me a little bit of extra time to work with it. So I start on one end, move it to whatever corner I want it to go, and then with the tip of my brush, I start to carve it around. Now, the key to this is to try to get all of the pieces that I'm connecting together nice and flush. So the way that I like to do that is one, overlap your second bead or your third or whatever to the previous bead, and then make sure it's nice and wet so that you could just blend it into one another. And it works out perfectly. Texture is always good with 3D acrylic designs, so note that it doesn't have to be super smooth. Again, I'm just going in with the tip of my brush and carving those details out however my mind thinks would look good. I'm going to continue that all the way down towards the tip. It is going to be fully covered with, again, intestines or brain matter, whichever one you prefer. All right, now that we have our first layer for those done, we're gonna go ahead and let it dry. We're moving on to our little ghost. Not even gonna lie, I redid the eyes and the mouth probably like 5 times because I just felt like the proportions were wrong and it looked off for some reason. Not quite sure what it was. Y'all gave me tips and tricks on the live when I was doing these, so thank you to you guys for tuning in our TikTok lives. It is very helpful, especially when I'm struggling with my creativity. So I went ahead and cured those, and then we're actually going in with a gem gel, adding our little ghost little details. I'm adding a little blob at the tip, and then with my liner brush, we are going to be bringing that product into a point upwards towards the mouth area, and then we cure in the flashlight, and then lastly into the light for a full 60 seconds. Now to bring this design to life, we mixed a concoction of jelly polish with a little bit of black to deepen up the color. I'm using deep red, however, if you add a little bit of black in there, it just makes the blood look extra juicy. So I'm first focusing using my liner brush from Veeda into all the little creases and crevices of our design. And then I'll smudge it here and there over top of the surface, kind of wiggle it around in different spots. But first we're focusing on those creases. So I'm gonna go ahead and apply that very loosely, randomly, nothing specific. If it's flowing out, even better. I'm gonna add it around also like the cuticle area, down the sides of the nail so that everything is nice and covered. And then this is the moment where I start to kind of just wiggle it around in certain spots. Nothing crazy, nothing specific, but I'm trying to still leave parts of it uncovered with red. So I'm just deepening up and giving a little bit more detail on random spots of the nail. Now I did go ahead and cure this in the light before moving on to the pinky nail because jelly polish does run a little bit. It is a little bit on the runnier side, so I wanted to make sure to cure that in the light fully before we moved on so that it didn't flow anywhere that we didn't want it to go. Now that we are working on the pinky nail, I'm going to focus on the middle section right where our wound is at. Deepen that up, make it nice and bloody and dark. And then we're going to be doing pretty much what we did on the middle finger where I'm just adding little details and smudging it on random parts of the nail for the rest of the design. So fully saturated in the center of it, and then we're just kind of wiggling it around. I actually at one point take some of the paint on my glove finger and I kind of smudge it in some of the areas of the nail just to give it a little bit more detail. And then once you're done with it and you're content, you're gonna cure that in the light for a full 60 seconds.
Don't forget the ones that made ya. Deep south sweating out flavor. This is for my day one, day one. This is for my day one. Don't forget the ones that made ya. Deep south sweating out flavor. This is for my day one, day one. Showed up, day one before the glow up. Don't need to ask for them to show love. Don't need to ask for them to show love, show love. Ooh, take it back to when nobody used to know me.
Now for a little ghosty, I'm going to do blood dripping out of the eye holes and the mouth hole. And I'm just saturating it a little bit more towards the actual eye and then kind of dragging it downwards. And we're going to be adding a little bit more blood splatter on the rest of that nail as well.
Ooh, take it back to when nobody used to know me. Lights turn low, I was just chilling with my homies. Now that we're
For the index finger, we're going to be doing a little handprint and blood splatter all over it. So I'm focusing first on the little palm, and then I added 4 little fingers on the palm portion, and then we're going to be adding the thumb. I'm going to be curing that in the light, and then we're going to be adding the thumb afterwards. So, I mean, the bottom portion of the palm. So note that we're doing it in 2 steps because I didn't want it to all flow together and run together and mess up my design. This I also wiped off and redid probably another 4 times, but it goes to show that I might show you guys something here, but don't let that fool you. Sometimes I struggle as well, and I am very open about it. So if you guys ever think like, oh, she's that good, heck no. Sometimes I struggle too. So now I'm gonna be adding the blood splatter, same little flick of the wrist movement all over it, and then we're gonna be carrying in the light for a full 60 seconds.
This is for my day one, day one. Ooh,
We are top coating the nails with Gloss It from Not Polished, but that pretty much concludes today's video. Let me know what you guys think down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a ton, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.
don't forget